Tetris, Dr. Mario. Tetris, Dr. Mario. Tetris, Dr. Mario. Tetris, Dr. Mario.
Stop! They're on one game pack. Tetris and Dr. Mario. It's twice as insane. Only for Super NES.
I'm gonna kick your tail. No.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Ultimate Super Nintendo review here on Player One Start. Among the Super Nintendo's vast library of titles, puzzle and strategy games shone through brightly, captivating players with their brain-teasing challenges and tactical thinking. Thanks to a lifetime of collecting, I do have a variety of titles for this system, and there are a bunch that I've played that have become some of my personal favorites on this game console. In this part of the Ultimate Super Nintendo review, we're going to start taking a look at some of the puzzle games on the system, as well as games that focus a bit more on strategy. And yes, believe it or not, this goes well beyond the game of Tetris. Let's go ahead and take a look. Bust-A-Move, also known as Puzzle Bobble, originally came out in 1994 in the arcades and was developed and published by Taito. The premise of the game is simple. You are given a bubble of a certain color, and your goal is to shoot and aim towards the other bubbles that are already in the puzzle that are the same color. Doing so causes the whole chain to disappear once you get more than 3 of them in a row. Any other bubble that was attached to it, if that was their only means of support, will also fall off the screen. I mostly remember playing this game and its various clones on PCs in the mid to late 90s, but this version on the Super Nintendo is done quite well, and I would definitely recommend it, especially the 2-player mode can become quite challenging. Ka-Blooey, also known as Bomboozle, is another puzzle game that also came out on the Super Nintendo as a console exclusive, but it was also released on a bunch of other computers of the time period. This one is okay. I mean, you're given this isometric perspective to move around the false 3D playfield, and your goal is to set off or collect all the bombs without falling off the tiles into the background. Again, I thought this one was just okay. It's nothing that really got me addicted to the game, and that isometric perspective still throws me off, so I couldn't really give this a full recommendation.
Kirby's Avalanche.
Kirby's Avalanche was known in Europe as Kirby's Ghost Trap, and this is a puzzle video game that looks strikingly similar to Puyo Puyo. I don't know what it is about Puyo Puyo, but it ended up in a lot of games in the mid-90s, so this is just another example of it. It's done well enough, so if you like that game, you will like this one, but given the choice, I'd rather play something like Tetris or Dr. Mario than Puyo Puyo. Lemmings is a classic title that showed up on almost every game and PC of the early to mid-90s, and this version on the Super Nintendo is a very faithful port. I really enjoyed playing it and going back through these first early levels. My only minor criticism of this game is using the directional pad instead of a mouse to make the menu selections, but other than that, it isn't too bad. I am a little less familiar with Lemmings 2: The Tribes, not getting into this one as much as the original Lemmings, but it is also here if you want to try it on the Super Nintendo. Although I did see some of the reviews of this game criticize the graphics as not being as well, I think it's good enough for the Super Nintendo, so nothing I really noticed. Ms. Pac-Man is the only arcade-style Pac-Man that made it to the Super Nintendo, and this one is again okay, but I'm really not a fan of the scrolling playfield. I think the best way to play Pac-Man is when you can see the entire maze in one screen without having to scroll. But other than that, the graphics are an upgrade from the original arcade version, and all the sound effects seem to be there, and I had a fun time playing through it, so overall, out of all the Pac-Man games that made it to the Super Nintendo, this one would be the one I would recommend, because it's the only one like the arcade. Pac-Man 2: The New Adventures, I'm just now realizing is a direct sequel to the original Pac-Man released in 1980, and this came out in 1994. So was the sequel worth the wait? Not really. For some reason, they decided to make this into a point-and-click adventure game instead of being a maze game. And not that they couldn't change up the formula for its sequel, but this game is boring. I have tried myself on multiple occasions to play it, and I always end up getting bored within the first couple of screens. While other reviews give this around a 7 out of 10, I would give it around a 2 out of 10. Just avoid this one if you can. Pac-Attack is a little bit better. This one was actually the first of the Pac-Man games to hit the Super Nintendo, at least of the ones I own in my collection. And this one is okay. It can be compared to something like Tetris or Columns, but it's not exactly quite like either one of those. It is neat and I get a momentary thrill out of this, but again, I would rather be playing Tetris, or Columns for that matter, than playing the Pac-Man version of it. So I will only recommend this to fans of Pac-Man or to fans of this style of puzzle games. Pinball Dreams was originally released on the Amiga in 1992, and this version on the Super Nintendo came out in 1994. And this game is a fairly faithful port. I didn't grow up with it, but I did try the original version in an emulator, and this one definitely is a competent port of the game, almost matching that of the Amiga, at least in my opinion. Again, I think the fact that the ball has to scroll from side to side and up and down can be a little bit infuriating, but I actually really enjoyed this game because I was a fan of a game like Extreme Pinball, which also came out on MS-DOS, and this game just takes me right back to that kind of nostalgia. Pinball Fantasies is kind of like an expansion pack, and although it's not as well regarded as the original, if you like the original, this one will definitely be a good one for you as well because it's just more of the same with different tables. Overall though, I don't think these games realistically are going to be for everybody, and you definitely don't need to have both of them, but if you are a fan of these early pinball games, I would definitely pick up one of these. Pinball Dreams happen to be my favorite. Super Bomberman was always a fun weekend rental for me, but the issue with me back in the day was that I wasn't very good at this game and couldn't figure out the strategy. In this game you play as Bomberman or as several Bombermen, and you go around a screen that doesn't scroll around through a Pac-Man style-like maze, placing bombs, blowing up obstacles, and enemies. The single-player mode is fun and will definitely get you prepared for when you do multiplayer battle, but multiplayer is where this game really shines. Back before we had LAN parties, this is one of the biggest games I remember playing with other people when we would have like game nights or get-togethers to play video games. I also happen to have Super Bomberman 2, but really, between both of these, there's not really much difference where I can recommend one over the other. There were several more that got released in Japan for the Super Famicom, but these were the only two I'm aware of that came out in the US. This one is a definite recommend if you plan on doing multiplayer for the Super Nintendo. And now on to probably my favorite puzzle game on the Super Nintendo, and that is Tetris and Dr. Mario. This game is everything you could have wanted from a port of both of these games. Starting out with Tetris, this game plays almost exactly like my favorite version of the game, which is the one on the Game Boy. It just has updated graphics for the Super Nintendo, and the music has a different twist, but is the same melodies as the Game Boy version. Throughout my playthrough, I was never able to get over 100,000 points, as I definitely am out of practice on this game, so I'm not sure if it has the rocket ship ending after 100,000 points. One of you will have to let me know in the comments. As for Dr. Mario, this game is again also exactly like the Game Boy version, just with upgraded sound and visuals. This is one I'm kind of surprised to have heard a lot of people skipped over back in the day because it is a very competent port and twist on the game of Tetris. In this game, you play as Dr. Mario prescribing pills to get rid of germs inside of this pill bottle, and you do that by matching the color of the pill to the color of the germ. I will note some frustration that when you're about done with a level, Mario will keep prescribing pills with colors that you don't need, making me think he's overprescribing the pills and should probably get his medical license pulled. But also in the later levels, at the very beginning, it is very difficult to get pills in the order that you need to get rid of germs so you have enough space to work with for the rest of the level. But overall, both of these games are excellent ports and definitely welcome on the Super Nintendo. But then they had to go in and add a third version. Mix and Match has you play alternating levels between Tetris and Dr. Mario, but competing against a second player. This mode can be quite fun, but it's also one that you can't play against the computer. At least I couldn't figure out how to get the computer to do anything. So this mode actually does require a second player, and I didn't have one during this playthrough, so I can't really tell you my thoughts on it. Overall, if you're going to have one puzzle game on this system, this is the one I'd recommend. I give it around a 9.5 out of 10. Definitely one I would consider essential. Apparently we didn't have to wait as long to get a sequel to Tetris than we did to get a sequel to Pac-Man. But this game was actually developed by Tosei Software and Nintendo themselves. In Tetris 2, instead of having the objective to just fill up a line so that they'll disappear, you also have to match the colors of the tetrominos that descend from the top of the playfield. The shapes that these come in are also varied more than the original game of Tetris, and just like in Dr. Mario, you have to match up the colors to the blocks that are already available at the bottom of the screen, with the objective to clear out the screen. This game is done very well, and I did get addicted to it a little bit, but not as much as the original Tetris game, so I'm only obliged to recommend this to people who are really big fans of Tetris. Tetris Attack was developed by Intelligent Systems and published by Nintendo for the Super Nintendo in 1996. And in this game, you must use an on-screen cursor to arrange colored blocks into horizontal or vertical rows. Matching 3 or more blocks together of the same color will destroy them, and again your goal is to wipe out all of the blocks on the screen. The longer you play, you'll have more rows of blocks that'll be added onto the bottom of the screen, and if any of your blocks touch the top of the screen, it's game over. If you play through on story mode, you will play against a series of computer-controlled opponents. Endless mode is just that, you play as long as you can survive. And then you also have a timed mode, which challenges you to score as many points as possible within a 2-minute limit. Stage clear mode will have you go through a series of stages where you have to clear all blocks below a certain line. And finally, in puzzle mode, you must clear all the blocks in a preset block arrangement in a limited number of moves. But of course, this game is also fun to play multiplayer as well. Upon its release, this game was very well received, eventually being named Electronic Gaming Monthly's Super Nintendo Game of the Year. Again, I really think you have to be a fan of Tetris to begin with to get this game, but it also offers a unique enough twist to where I think newcomers can also enjoy this one as well. Timon and Pumbaa's Jungle Games is a game that I had a lot of fun playing as a kid on the PC. The game, I remember, had a whole bunch of cutscenes and a lot of voice excerpts from the voice actors that voiced Timon and Pumbaa in the movie, and in this game you just play a lot of variations of games such as Pinball, Frogger, Space Invaders, or probably more accurately, Astro Smash for the Intellivision, and then there's a slingshot shooting game. The PC version also included a version of Puyo Puyo, which I assume they had to cut either due to cartridge space or due to licensing issues. The problem with this game is that due to the limited cartridge space, they had to cut out all the voice dialogue, so I really feel like the game lost out on a lot of charm because of that. And also, I don't really feel like this game is well optimized. The pinball game, the physics are really screwed up, and the ball always gravitates towards the bottom of the screen a lot more than it did in the PC version. The Frogger game has a real big delay between when you press the button to move and when he actually moves across the river. The Slingshot game is a bear to try to get through with the D-pad instead of having a mouse, which the PC version would have had. In fact, the only game I really enjoyed on here was the burping game, but Pumbaa moves way too slowly. Slower than he did in the PC version. So I would like to recommend this due to it being one of my favorite PC games of the time period. I have to say you should skip this one because it's just not well optimized for the Super Nintendo. Wario's Woods is known for being the last officially licensed NES game in North America, but it also got a port on the Super Nintendo because, in 1994, let's face it, most people would have played this on the Super Nintendo. This is also the only game that I am aware of on the Super Nintendo that features Wario as a character. This game is yet another spin-off of the Tetris concept, and maybe a hint of Puyo Puyo, but I was never really a big fan of this game. It's just a slight diversion that I would say if you're a fan of this style of gameplay, you should pick it up, but if not, it's easily skippable. I have very similar thoughts about Yoshi's Cookie, which is again another spin-off and twist on the Tetris concept, this time the pieces coming at you from two different directions. And again, this is fine, it's just something that really wasn't appealing to me, so I would say if you're a hardcore puzzle game fan, you could pick this up, but I wouldn't call it essential. And if you haven't gotten tired of Tetris yet, have you tried Wordtris? This is Tetris, but with letters to make words instead of pieces that you just create a solid line with. This one is again one that I actually have kind of found fun and I would definitely come back to, but I can't recommend it as essential because you not only have to be a fan of puzzle games, but also a fan of word games like crosswords and Scrabble and stuff like that. When Computer Gaming World reviewed this game, they said that Wordtris is as infuriating as it is incredibly addictive, and I 100% agree with that. After playing through a variety of puzzle games on the system, I can definitely say that Tetris and Dr. Mario is by far my favorite on this list. But in all honesty, these aren't games that I really think of when I look at the Super Nintendo because these are games that I would consider to be short, kind of little time waster games. These are games that I can easily jump in and out of without having to dedicate a bunch of time to it. And while I find these games more appealing as an adult, as a kid I was really looking for games that I can sink my teeth into and play over a long period of time. But of course as a kid you have a lot more time as you do as an adult. But this is by no means an all-inclusive list, and I'm sure I missed a couple of titles that maybe some of you out there have as your favorites. Please let me know which puzzle games you found most exciting in the comments below, and stay tuned for the next part where I finish up the gameplay section of the Ultimate Super Nintendo review. If you like this video and you'd like to help out with future projects on this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. A special thanks to those Patreons you see on screen. Also, if you like what you see, please remember to leave a like and click that subscribe button on your way out. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.